Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we help you get a really fast, deep grasp of some of the most complex critiques of society and policy. You're here because you want to get straight to the core of the argument, and, well, today we have a source that really challenges, the very ground we think we're standing on. Our focus is a piece called The Plywood Sanctuary, exposing the Darwinian reality of the West. It's dense, it's pretty dark, and our mission here is just to unpack its central argument for you.
And it is a provocative argument. The question it poses is, well, it's intense. It asks, what if the things we believe are the very foundations of our society, democracy, human rights, rule of law, what if they aren't structural at all?
Yeah, not the foundation.
Not at all. The source suggests they're more like plywood and plaster, just painted to look like a solid, civilized house.
What's it hiding?
A system that's driven by pure primal power.
So that's what we're doing today. We're going to impartially detail this thesis, that the West's stated morals are, well, a facade for a kind of political Darwinism. We'll get into the stakes, the mechanism of this deception they talk about, and the historical reasoning behind it. So let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with that central metaphor, because it really does set the tone for everything else.
The Plywood Sanctuary.
Yeah.
Yeah, the source just throws out that whole comfortable image of society as, like, a solid house built on bedrock.
Right. Instead, the author says we're living on a movie set.
A movie set built over a swamp.
Exactly. There's no inherent structural integrity, no real foundation of morality or principle holding it all up.
And that's the first big claim, isn't it? The source says the deep-rooted lie is this idea that our systems are just flawed.
That they're imperfect, but we can fix them. The source completely rejects that.
So the system isn't broken.
It's not broken at all. The argument is that it's operating exactly as it was designed to, and that design is the law of the jungle.
Wow. Okay, so it's not about fairness.
It's about capability.
And to make that point, they use that really raw analogy of the lion and the gazelle.
They do. It strips away all the complexity. In the wild, rights are just determined by capability. Full stop. The lion can take the gazelle's life.
And so in that world, it has the right to.
Functionally, yes. And the source then takes that amoral animalistic basis and applies it directly to the modern West.
How does that even work in a society with, courts and laws?
Well, they claim that despite all the talk of universal rights, the reality is that our rights are completely tied to our power.
So if you're a huge corporation or a superpower.
Exactly. If you have the capability, the money, the lawyers, the military might to enforce your will, then you functionally have the right to do it.
The moral language, then, is just irrelevant when there's a real conflict.
It becomes secondary. So when a weaker person or a small country goes up against a stronger one, the moral framework doesn't really protect them. Capability is what decides the outcome.
That's a chilling conclusion.
It is, because for the average person, it means if you can't stop a violation, if you can't afford the legal fight, or you don't have the political power, the source argues you don't really have rights.
You're just prey.
You're relegated to the role of prey. The system doesn't shield you from the strong. It just provides the theater for the strong to do what they want.
Okay, so if that's true, and it really is just might makes right, why go to all the trouble? Why build the plywood facade at all?
Because you need mass compliance. You couldn't maintain order otherwise. The veneer of civilization is essential for stability.
So that's where the moral rhetoric comes in.
Precisely. The source calls it the sedative of moral rhetoric. The system is constantly broadcasting these high-minded ideals, equality, due process, respect for the individual.
And that language isn't just like hypocrisy. In this analysis, it's a tool.
A functional tool of power. It's a deliberate sedative.
A sedative. How so?
The source says it makes the average person toothless and clawless. We're all taught to wait for the referee, for the system to step in and make things fair.
Because we believe in the ideals.
We believe in the ideals, so we rely on the promise of the system. And that makes us completely unprepared for the raw, brutal reality of power when it asserts itself.
So our expectation of fairness is actually what disarms us.
Yes. And it sets up this catastrophic psychological failure when the system inevitably sides with power.
And the source has a name for that moment, right?
They do. It's the moment the plywood facade is punched through by the fist of power.
That's a strong image.
Think about it. The reality you believed in just shatters, and suddenly the cold air of the wilderness rushes in.
And they call the result profound psychological trauma. That feels, I don't know, a bit extreme. Why trauma, not just disappointment?
Because it's about cognitive dissonance. You think you're living your life on this well-built movie set, you believe in the walls and the street signs,
Right.
and then you suddenly realize you're actually in a brutal wilderness, and the walls were just cardboard all along.
Ah, okay. The trauma comes from trying to hold those two realities in your head at once.
Exactly. The ideal versus the reality. That dissonance is what confuses people, makes them feel like victims, because they just can't reconcile the promise of fairness with the injustice they actually experienced.
It's the shock of betrayal, not just the loss itself.
That's a great way to put it. You were let down by the very system that promised to protect you from the jungle.
And the source claims this isn't just a domestic thing, it gets exported.
Oh, absolutely. When we shift to international policy, the deception gets even bigger.
So let's get into the foreign policy claims, because this is where the source is, deeply critical of the West.
It is. So in the global arena, the source points to this highly moral vocabulary that's always used.
Words like democracy, human rights, freedom.
International law, yeah, that's the language used to justify actions. But then you look at the actual track record interventions, destabilization, warfare.
And the source says the real language being spoken is just political Darwinism.
Pure political Darwinism. The moral language is the press release for the folks back home. It keeps the sedative working. But the operating system is just capability defining what is right.
So the strong state does what it wants, and then the story is written afterwards to make it sound noble.
That's the core insight. And this system doesn't just dictate actions, it also dictates how we categorize things. Like violence.
How so?
Well, the argument is that the public is conditioned to believe terrorism looks a certain way, it happens in certain places, it's done by certain kinds of people.
Which means destruction caused by the right kind of leaders inside that Western framework.
It gets overlooked. Or it's redefined as a necessary, intervention. The violence is ignored because the moral lens has been manipulated to only focus on threats coming from outside the Plywood Sanctuary.
This leads into a pretty sensitive claim the source makes, doesn't it? About Caucasianism.
It does, and we have to be clear, we're just reporting what the source asserts here. They use that term Caucasianism to mean Western centrism.
And what does that mean exactly?
It means this framework holds a deep, often unconscious assumption that Western ideas, actions, and governments are inherently right by default.
Right by default.
Yeah, it's the idea that this moral and legal authority just flows from a specific history of conquest and organization. So if a power operates inside that framework, its actions, even massively violent ones, are given a kind of implicit justification.
And anything outside that framework.
Anything outside of it that challenges Western power is automatically branded as wrong or dangerous or terrorist. It creates this moral binary.
A binary designed to legitimize one side and delegitimize the other.
It makes the system self-justifying.
So the rhetoric of moral authority is basically a gatekeeper.
It is. It ensures only one set of actors gets to define what's just, and the source concludes by saying that a lot of the world, especially non-Western powers, is starting to see this very clearly now.
The cover story is wearing thin.
That's the argument. The idea that terrorism and morality have been manipulated to serve power, not principle, is gaining traction.
Which brings us right back to that core analogy. If it's all built on a swamp, then morality really is disposable.
It's a luxury accessory, as the source puts it, not a structural necessity.
Something you display when it's convenient.
Exactly. A nice poster on the wall of the movie set, but the second it gets in the way of the primal drive for dominance, it's gone.
And the source's historical analysis here is pretty bleak. They argue that modern West is in a unique bind.
They do. They contrast it with other civilizations that might have these deep pre-existing ancestral frameworks to fall back on.
And the West doesn't.
Well, the authors trace this lineage from Viking expansionism through colonialism to modern imperialism, and they say the one continuous thread is the law of the forest, the strong devouring the weak.
So when things go wrong in the modern West, there's no, ancient wisdom or shared ethical foundation to return to.
Their argument is that the history is the history of dominance. The search for some other deeper ethical foundation is futile because the operating principle has always been conquest and capability.
So when the plywood cracks, all that's left underneath is that same old drive for power.
It just reasserts itself,
Yeah.
which is what reinforces the Darwinian reality.
And for you, the listener, trying to make sense of all this, it really forces you to look past the rhetoric.
It does.
If the source is right, real understanding means seeing the veneer for what it is and looking for the power dynamics underneath. It's a kind of shortcut, I guess. It lets you discard the false assumptions right away. So let's bring this all together. The core takeaway from the Plywood Sanctuary is this idea that recognizing the Darwinian reality. It's like waking up on the movie set and seeing the props for what they are.
Yeah, and that realization brings you to this very painful dilemma the source leaves you with.
Which is?
You can't fix a house that was never built to shelter you in the first place.
So if its purpose was always dominance, not safety, then trying to reform it to make it fairer is.
It's missing the point. You're trying to fix the plumbing in a house that has no foundation.
And that really is the challenge, isn't it?
It is. And it leaves you with a final, really difficult question. If we accept the source's claim for a moment, that the whole framework requires us to ignore destruction when it's done by the right leaders,
Yeah.
what happens to your own sense of ethical clarity? What happens to your own morality when that line between justified force and pure capability just disappears completely?
That's a tough one.
That vanishing point, that's the core dilemma of living in what the author calls a wilderness that calls itself a civilization.